it depends on the society. It's definitely a risk. I mean, if you look around the world, most societies aren't free, right? And you could get a rough estimate of that just by looking at, well, which societies attract immigrants? And that's just an obvious marker, right? It's like, do you want to live there or not? That's the fundamental. Or do you want to leave where you are and go there?
Yeah.
You say, well, there isn't perfect. It's like, fair enough.
It's freer though.
It is right. It's better than where you're at. And so you can just rank countries by how many people want to go there, and you get a rough estimate of who's got the balance right. And so you might say, well, order keeps chaos under control. It's like, yes, but not optimally. What keeps chaos under control, first of all, it's not under control, it's balanced. That's a better way of thinking about it. What keeps order and chaos optimally balanced is something like logos. And I mean that technically. When you have a dialogue, so our dialogue is engaging. So dialogue means dialogos. It means two logos interacting. So the question is, what's logos? And logos is something like the spirit that mediates between order and chaos. And it is why is it a spirit? Well, it's a spirit because it can inhabit you, and it produces a mode of being. And the mode of being is something like lack of self-consciousness and deep engagement. And so that's the mark that things are balanced. And that's not a tyrant. It's the very opposite of a tyrant. And it's not order. It's the phenomenon that produces habitable order out of chaos. And you can tell when that's happening because it happens if you're in a loving relationship with your wife. And there's that playful dynamic that goes along with that. It happens when you have the same with your kids. It manifests itself most clearly in the spirit of play. And so our discussion is somewhat playful, like we're pushing each other. We're trying to discuss things we don't understand, and there's a back and forth. But it's optimally balanced because there's a bit of humor about it. So that's one of the ways you can tell it's optimally balanced. And with any luck, we're doing it well enough so that other people who aren't part of the conversation still find it engaging, right? And so you can tell that we've got something right there. Not only is it working for the two of us and the two of us and the three of us, but also it's working in a manner that works for us, that's working for other people. So there's a kind of harmonious balance there that's sort of like music. And music's a good representation of that. That's why people play music, right? Because it marks the spirit of play, because musicians are playing with sound, and they do that in a harmonious way where all the parts are related to one another and are moving towards some point. And so music is a great representation of the spirit of play. It's the best representation of the spirit of play, I think, abstractly of all the arts. And so that's the antithesis to power. That's the right way of thinking about it. It's the antithesis to power, especially corrupt power. Now, back to pride. Pride is an impediment to the spirit of play. That's a good way of thinking about it. Pride requires the imposition of force, because if I know what I'm doing, and I'm trumpeting that as well as something that marks my identity above yours, I'm proud of it, then I can't engage in dialogue. I can't be humble. I can't open myself up to revelation, let's say, because a conversation is a form of revelation, right? Because it's an interpersonal communication. I get access to you, which is quite something, because you've paid for your experience with hardship, and you can tell me about that, and if I listen, then maybe I won't have to have the hardship that would be necessary to garner the wisdom.
How often do you find that's the case? Because I don't know, I feel like a lot of the time maybe people have told me while I was young, avoid this or avoid that, and the only time I've really learned it is when it kind of happened to me.
Well, I think the less you're willing to die optimally, the more it has to be forced upon you by fate. And so if you keep yourself updated because you're looking in the nooks and crannies, then the serpents can't breed and come out and get you. And that's also an extremely old story, like the notion that if you ignore a snake anywhere, it'll just grow, and eventually it'll come out of the closet and get you, And so the question, well, what do you do about that? It's like, well, you go look for the snakes while they're still babies. And so, to some degree, that's what we're doing in this conversation, is we're thinking, well, this bugs me, and this bugs me, and I don't really understand this, and I don't really understand that. Maybe we should discuss it, delineate it, unpack it, and so then we can dispense with the problem before it makes itself manifest at a large scale. And that's why we have a right to free speech. So first of all, we don't have a right to free speech. That's a wrong way of thinking about it. Any society that's going to stabilize itself across time has to be predicated on the ability of people to communicate. Why? Well, because that's how we think. Because you might think you go home and think. It's like, first of all, don't be thinking you're that good at thinking. It's really hard to learn how to think. You have to learn how to divide yourself into several people internally. And then you have to let those people represent things you don't want to represent. And then you have to let them have a war in your head. And you have to be able to tolerate that. That's really hard. And you probably can't do it. There's very few people who are expert at that. It takes years of training. So how do you do it if you're not able to really think? Now, that doesn't mean you can't think at all, but don't be thinking you're an expert at it. Well, you do that by talking to people. That's how you think. And then the question is, why do you think? Well, Alfred North Whitehead said, the reason we think is so that we can let our thoughts die instead of us. So imagine you have a stupid idea, which is highly probable, right?
Just imagine.
You might have 50 of them a day.
Many.
So then you think, well, let's go act out that stupid idea, which is what you do if you're an impulsive. And so you act out the stupid idea and you get just walloped by the world and maybe you die. Well, so what's an alternative? Well, why don't you throw your stupid idea out on the table to a bunch of other people and say, well, I have this idea and I'm kind of thinking about acting it out. Is it stupid? And maybe you're prideful about your idea because, you're attracted by it and you thought it up, whatever that means. And so now you're glued to it, plus it tiles something for you. So you're invested in it. And you don't want it to be a stupid idea, but then fine. Do you want to die? Or do you want to let your idea die? And so a lot of what we do in dialogue is kill stupid ideas. And we do that so we don't act them out. And we don't want to act them out because then we die. And this even works biologically. So the part of your brain that generates thought grew out of the part of your brain that you use to voluntarily control your actions. So you could say a thought is a potential action. People think a thought is a representation of the world. It's like, yeah, not fundamentally. Fundamentally, a thought is a potential action. So then in your imagination, you make avatars of yourself. So that's you in your imagination. What if I did this? It's a little avatar of yourself. You think, what if I did this? Here's the world. I act like this. These good things happen. That's my vision. Then you throw your vision on the table and you say, well, I have this vision. And you say, well, that's a stupid vision because you didn't take this into account. And how are you going to do that? And you think, oh, that sucks because I had this vision. But, well, thank you because I didn't see those snakes,
Right.
And then it's tricky because maybe you're mad because I had a vision and you don't have one. And so you're pissed off about that. And so you're just attacking my vision because, you don't have anything better to do. And
I've had this conversation with someone before where a kid told me he wanted 1 million followers on social media.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but that's not going to happen though. Not for you.
Right.
Because I had the experience, and then I had that moment where they basically freaked out right in front of me.
You shatter a dream.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so a dream is a tile of the future. So you say, what's the future? Well, you don't know. Well, here's a vision. So it's a tile. And then it covers the future. And it also covers it in a pleasing way.
Yeah.
Then you come along and say, it's a little low res. Well, you could say to someone who wants that, are you sure you want 1 million followers? Because people say, I'd be happy if I had $400 million. It's like, you think you could handle that responsibility, do you? Like you're so sure of that all of a sudden you'd have all this money dumped on you can't even control your household budget. You live from paycheck to paycheck. Now somebody's going to dump a treasure on your steps and that's going to fix your life. It's like, okay, how much are you going to give to your relatives? Like none? Oh, that'll work out real well. Too much? So then you're going to take away their responsibility from them, are you? And you're going to get that balance exactly right. And then what are you going to do with that money? Because as soon as you got the money, the parasites are going to come in and take your money.
Yeah.
I had clients that were...
Happens quickly, believe me.
Unbelievably quickly. It happens unbelievably quickly.
Yeah.
You'll see, the average family fortune lasts 3 generations. That's all. Because money sitting around, not being carefully monitored, it's like water. It just... disappears.
It's happened to me in my life. It's the amount of money I've had in my life.
You've spent 3 family generations worth of cash.
No, I'm talking about just it's been quite something because I came from nothing.
Yeah.
And I've made amounts of money that I never dreamed were possible.
Right.
and yet I have very little to show for it, if I'm being honest with you, because
Right.
of what culminates around you and how many people all of a sudden come to the table. And me being a generous, soft-natured person, they say a fool is easily parted with his money. I feel
Yeah.
like a fool,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.